Today, I'd like to continue our series on the environment. We've been looking at the UN climate report, and we've discovered that certainly there are many serious problems with regard to the environment that we're trying to work on, take different approaches about, really make sure that our air, our water is a lot cleaner, our soil. Certainly, that's an imperative in terms of today uh, what we've seen, the sicknesses and the weather events related to climate change. One of the ideas that has been proposed is to take the uh, extra CO2 that we are emitting and in some way store that in the ground so that it won't become an issue for us in the air. It won't really have that negative effect in terms of the global warming. Wyoming is the top coal mining region in the United States. Uh, and what they're trying to do in Wyoming now is to drill into the ground 2 miles. And the goal of this drilling is that tiny spaces in the rock, deep underground, can permanently store vast volumes of greenhouse gas emitted by a coal fired power plant. So here are these plants. They're in Wyoming and other parts of the country, but primarily here in Wyoming. And what they're trying to do now is make sure that that extra carbon that is being emitted from the coal is stored underground so that it doesn't damage our environment. This process is known as carbon storage. The problem that is related to this and that we are trying to solve in terms of this whole approach of the carbon storage, is higher electricity costs. So if you can use the coal, which is very available in the United States, and it's there to be used, if you can use that, and if you can use it in a safe way, where you're not damaging the air, not damaging the environment, not adding to global warming. If you can do that in a safe way, you can keep the cost of electricity lower, and you're not importing oil, you're not dealing with other problems, other effects that could have. 2.5 billion from Congress, plus bigger tax incentives have been given from the Inflation Reduction Act. So this act realized that there are certain places in the United States where this is going to be an issue because they're heavily dependent on the coal for their energy. And instead of going away from that completely, perhaps keeping that, but doing it in a way that is safe, that is responsible, that doesn't create any damage in terms of the environment. So the question is, can this be done? They're trying to preserve the lifespan in Wyoming of a relatively new coal-fired power plant. That plant is called Dry Fork Station. So recently built, fairly recently, and what they're trying to do is say, well, if we can use this technology in a good way and not damage the environment, perhaps this power plant can have a longer lifespan rather than shut it down completely. It's a recent investment. Um, and then, of course, all the costs associated with generating another form of power would not be borne by the taxpayers. The coal industry still underpins Wyoming's economy. So when you're talking about, well, let's throw out the coal industry completely, naturally, the people in Wyoming are going to get very nervous, just like the people in West Virginia get very certain areas of the country where coal is important. Uh, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, this is going to have a very adverse effect in terms of jobs, in terms of taxes, in terms of what we pay for energy. All of this is going to create a real problem for us. Is there another way we can do this? Where we can do it in a good way, a safe way? Is this possible for us? Uh, Now, what's called here in terms of the technology is pore space, and that is the microscopic spaces between the grains of sandstone. So there are really tiny spaces there, and if we drill down, we can perhaps put the carbon, put the CO2 in those spaces. What is the goal here? The goal is to store 55 million tons of carbon dioxide over 30 years. So if that goal can be accomplished, if it can be taken out of the atmosphere, then it is a win-win. The atmosphere is good, and we're saving these jobs, and we're lowering the cost of electricity. Interestingly enough, you're using the exact same drill rigs as the oil industry to bore 2 wells that are almost 10,000 feet deep. They take core samples from 9 different geological formations. So you can see how far down they're going, that we're getting into these different formations over the years and taking samples and saying, well, is this possible? Can we do this? Can we store the carbon in the ground? They study how injection at one well, using salt water as a stand-in for liquid carbon dioxide, could affect fluid behavior in the other well. So in order to make sure that it's done safely, you can't store it in one area and then it negatively impacts another area. You have to make sure that this can be done safely in order to achieve the balance that you want to in terms of the technology. Now this, of course, is not a new process. The oil and gas industry has used carbon dioxide after it is separated from the methane sold for fuel to recharge aging oil fields. So this is something that the people are used to doing. They've been doing it for quite a number of years. So when the gas is separated and the methane is sold, well, you have this carbon dioxide. What do you do with it? You can put it in the oil fields, and it kind of helps to prolong the life of the oil field. Now, of course, as anything in the environmental field, there are critics who would oppose this. What is the criticism that they are leveling against this idea of the carbon capture and putting it in the ground? Critics say, first of all, the process is expensive. You're trying to save money in terms of not, you know, failing to use this fairly new coal plant and all of the coal, but you're having this other process. Well, are you really going to save money by this expensive process of storing the carbon in the ground? So again, there's a trade-off. Does it make sense economically is the first hurdle that you have to overcome. Then it also provides a lifeline to the coal, oil, and natural gas industries. So if you're going to send the message that you're going to try to move away from those industries and rely more on the renewable industries like wind and solar and maybe nuclear power, if you're going to go in that direction, but then you're going in this direction, well, are you sending the wrong message? And of course, as you look at it, you have to weigh a lot of concerns here. Is it going to be economically feasible, first of all, to do this? Let's look at the cost aspect. Is it going to be good for the environment? Is it really going to solve the problem of the global warming? Is this going to be helpful in that regard? Is that going to accomplish that? And then what about the transition time to other forms, the renewable forms of power? Can you work this out? So again, these are questions that are being asked and debated, certainly critics on both sides. And eventually, of course, this issue will be resolved and probably most strongly in terms of the economic impact and the environmental impact of this technology.